So thank you so much for inviting me and for doing this festival. Just want to start by acknowledging the Indigenous people that have traditionally shared this territory. Not always everybody, and I find it safer to acknowledge all three: the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississauga-New-Credit. Before we start, I also want to acknowledge all the ancestors in the room, in particular because we're dealing with such an intense subject. A lot of these films, I'm pretty certain that we have a lot of sisters who are actually in the spirit world with us today. And just want to thank you all for doing this work. And maybe we can start off our discussion with everybody. If you could maybe talk about your process or what brought you to make the film that was shown here today. Maybe we can start with Norway, Skype.
I wrote violence myself, and writing is very cathartic for me. So the film started out as a short story, and then as I sort of transitioned into becoming a filmmaker in the last few years, I decided that it needed to become a film. So yeah, took it from there. It was a winner in Vancouver's Crazy Eights film competition, so we actually only had 8 days to make the film start to finish. So it was pretty crazy, the entire process of actually making the film.
James, would you like to go next?
It's also was therapeutic for me to do, and I was actually I took a workshop that got me involved in making that movie, and it was I found a pamphlet that said queer youth are going to be subsidized to make movies, and I thought to myself, I could be a queer youth. Why not try this out? And so I went there and I made a movie. I realized that at the time I was seen as female, so when I went to that workshop I was looking around and thinking, do I think anyone's attractive here? Am I queer or what? And because I think I came out later in life because of a lot of homelessness and abuse and stuff like that. So that workshop helped me come out and make that movie.
The sheer fact that my mom was converting to Orthodox Judaism at the same time that I was transitioning seemed like a film made for Oprah Winfrey, and I couldn't figure out how I was going to tell it, but I knew that there was something there. And then the longer I spent thinking about my relationship to my mom and our history together, I realized that actually wasn't the story to tell, and that it really had a lot more to do with some of our history and violence narratives. But my initial inquiry was the combination of the conversion alongside the transition was really too good to stop thinking about.
Well, it was a commission for the imagineNATIVE Stolen Sisters digital initiative. It was 4 1-minute short films that was to be broadcasted on the transit system in like the subway in Toronto. And I had made a short film about the same topic before. It was about a woman that was murdered in Calgary in 1999. And through making that film, it was very rewarding to kind of help out the cause and kind of spread awareness. So when the call for submissions came out, me and my filmmaking partner, who's here in the audience, Christine Cook right here, we kind of jumped on it, and we came up with an idea of these women disappearing from the family photos, and it kind of changed as time went on, just with different complications with our original plan, but that was my process.
I gave a workshop here on campus in the winter, and Amy was a participant. It was a part of a film and activism class, and I think the professor and the students wanted to have a sense of anti-oppression and how to align themselves as allies before they went out into the field and started shooting and talking with people who had various experiences around oppression and marginalization. So I came in to do a workshop, and just based on my experience with the class, someone approached me afterward and asked me to participate, and I was happy to do that because I feel very strongly about these issues that's reflected in my own artistry.
What kind of reactions have you been having?
Well, actually, for the most part, people have been really supportive of the film. I mean, we get the general sort of questions that you expect. You know, isn't this kind of hypocritical in a way? Are you condoning violence? And you know, those questions that you would expect from a film that is so violent. But I think for the most part, the audiences have been really supportive and understand that that the violence in the film is itself just a manifestation of sort of the pain or the rage that survivors of sexual assault do feel. And I personally do not condone violence. I don't think it's some sort of solution for this huge issue that's happening in Canada and all over North America with Indigenous women, but the status quo isn't working either.
I've performed that poem just about everywhere in the GTA, Southern Ontario, all across, but I've only ever been asked that question once, and I was really, really surprised when the question came up, because that's not what I saw myself as doing. I didn't see myself as condoning violence to make up a fictionalized, never gonna happen sort of army of anti-oppression, you know? And I think it's really an interesting, I mean, I don't know what the person who asked the question was thinking or why they saw it as that, but I think it's a very interesting response to say to somebody who's speaking out against other types of violence. And it's also, it's a type of silencing, I think. It's a type of silencing to say to somebody, but aren't you condoning violence if you're speaking out against something that's already so very violent and something that we live with and are complacent about and that we don't speak up against and that we find ways to partake of and participate in. And yet when certain people come forward and posit certain types of things that involve violence, and all of a sudden someone's quick to name violence and to say, aren't you condoning violence, and things like that. And I just find it really interesting because as an artist, it makes me wonder if people are getting a nuanced reading of my work. And it also makes me wonder how those same people survive. There's so much violence in our world, and like if the creation of some fictional sort of responsive violence that is speaking out against oppression or showing where oppression happens or the ways that oppression happening is that much of an upset, then how do you survive on a day-to-day basis when all this stuff is happening around you? Like, do you ask everybody on the street, how come you're so violent? Or is it only because you don't know what that person does when they go home that evening? Or is it only because you see a person who looks a certain way or comes from a certain group speaking about things that are violent in response to violence, and that's why you think you have the right to say, but you're pushing violence? I don't know, I find it really interesting.
Well, the TTC had, they censored, well, they wouldn't let us, have the words, the police killed her as a part of our film. After it said, the police didn't protect my mother, the police killed her, so the TTC wouldn't let us have that on their transit system. So, so they gave us kind of some suggestions of what we could change it, and someone from imagineNATIVE had said that maybe we should write the police, I forget what they
erased her.
They erased her, the police erased her, and we kind of just decided to, well, we thought that was okay or whatever, but then we thought if we blacked it all out and just kind of made it like we were censored, that I don't know, that would be just as strong of a message that, who would make something with censor bars on it, so people would kind of ask questions, but that's what happened.
Yeah, it was kind of a hard point as an artist, like where you've been given the freedom to make something but the parameters of a public space, so it's not a festival where you can say whatever you want, it is a public space. But we weren't actually given the guidelines when we started. Our contract said you have to follow the guidelines, but we didn't actually receive them. Plus the guidelines were really vague. It was basically don't incite hatred, don't cause trouble, basically. And then they said, well, it was never proven in court that the police killed her. And it's like, well, of course it wasn't proven in court because the police won't do an inquiry. The police refused to have an inquiry into the fact that they ran her over on her reservation. But it was a curator for public art that we were speaking with, and so we kind of saw her point as well, where she doesn't want to get the whole project pulled down. It was she was kind of going out on a limb to even put work of that content into a public space like that. And we didn't want to wreck the relationship for imagineNATIVE and the TTC for future artists either. So in the end, we sent her three kind of redacted lines. We didn't think they'd go for the police blanked her, and they didn't. They were like, no, but they did go for just the fully redacted line where it's just blacked out, where then it's clear that it was censored, but it's, someone would have to go find out what it actually said or research the subject that piece was about. So that was just interesting, coming up against, here's a woman that was killed by the police never called the coroner, they never held an inquiry, they've totally shuffled it under the rug, and then you're given an opportunity to talk about it in a public forum, and the public venue says, no, you can't talk about that. So it was a quandary that we were in for a few days of trying to figure out how to deal with it.
That's a really tough question. Well, I feel that personally, the art that I make somehow has to involve issues of social justice. I feel like art in and of itself should be a medium for social change or for provoking dialogue for social change. So I really hope that the work that I create generates dialogue. Just being a part of this right now is really, really incredible to know that there's a room full of people talking about these really, really important issues, all because of the films that were made. And it's really an honor to be sitting on this panel, even though I'm all the way over here. It's really an honor to be sitting on this panel with the other filmmakers. And everyone's just had really, really incredible things to say so far. But I just really hope that the work I make generates dialogue and provokes thought. And that's really it. It's really up to the audience what they take away from it. I can't really have any sort of say in that, right?
Yeah, she said it very well for me. I do hope to actually make movies that are more fun at some day. When I was a kid, I wanted to have something that would record my dreams. And maybe my dreams can be happy dreams. After I go through this therapeutic stuff, but at imagineNATIVE there was a question like, what is this festival gonna look like in 100 years, and is it still gonna be about this depressing stuff? And I really hope not, really, but maybe it's just life.
I think that my position in relation to my work changes based on who's seeing it and who's engaging with it. So it's really interesting when all of a sudden the trans part of my life is foregrounded so dramatically. For an example with this film, the sexual violence narrative is generally engaged with more succinctly than maybe some parts of my gender identity, which happen to take the stage in other pieces. So I do think I agree that it's really audience contingent, and my experience showing this film thus far is that it has been very, very different every time, ranging from people saying it went totally over my head to people sort of engaging with the more nuanced and subtle bits of the piece.
I'd have to agree, with what people have said. I think I took on the role of, somewhat of an activist, and for me, I just, like through making this film, we always wish that, or we always hope that somebody could come forward possibly, and some information could be somehow leaked out that was never, out there before, and best case scenario, maybe one of these women would actually be found.
I definitely consider myself to be an activist, and the form that my activism has taken has shifted and changed over the last 15 years or so. Specifically, I became a poet because I'm not sure how I figured it out, but I realized that I could do a 3-hour workshop on anti-racism and get a whole bunch of white people really mad at me. Or I could get up in front of a microphone and yell at them for 3 minutes, and then they'd come and thank me for telling them they were racist. So I figured, wow, 3 minutes, 3 hours, I know which one I'm going for. And so I started to activistly write poems. Being a dub poet is a choice that I make consciously because dub poetry is a type of praxis. The act of creating and performing poetry is my action in the world that comes as a part of and through reflecting on my own privilege and my own positioning and how I use my personal power. So what I hope that audiences will get from my work is maybe a starting point for their own praxis. And by that, I mean a self-awareness. If it helps people to, I want to hold up a mirror. If it helps people to see themselves, to understand how they're positioned and how that positioning impacts on their movements in the world, and then from that they can figure out how they want to use their own personal power, then that would be super sweet bonus.
I guess one of the main reasons why I chose to make it a genre film and have it so stylized in terms of making it sort of this neo-noir action thriller type deal was because I figured that it would play to a larger audience, and an audience that wouldn't necessarily watch films that deal with this sort of subject matter. And that audience in particular is generally a male audience and a white male audience. And I also just wanted the film to also be entertaining. And I really just wanted to see a Native chick kick ass. So I've always had an affinity for action films. I really don't know why, but I enjoy watching action films, and I wanted to see a Native woman playing a lead role and not being hypersexualized and not just being some sort of peripheral character, because there's a severe lack of strong female roles in action films, and it's even worse when it comes to women of color. So I just really wanted to see that, and hopefully it goes well with the feature. It gets out there to a larger audience.
Thank you. James, do you want to continue?
Okay. It's over a decade since I made that one, but I think I was sort of frustrated with just talking to within my peers or about the issues, and just feeling like there's no justice system. I don't know. Sorry, I'm kind of triggered about my own sexual abuse stuff from that. In a good way, the regular reasoning really struck a chord with me. So I'm kind of thinking about that, and I hope it's okay that I talk about that. So, like, when you tell somebody something bad happened to you, usually they say they have something in return, like, oh well, it's this is what happened to me, or anyway, it's really hard to get to re-traumatize yourself in a courtroom and go through all that and think about your abuser is hurting other people, and just to try and turn the theater into a courtroom in some sense, I suppose.
It's a really powerful statement.
The way I created it was just kind of like the art that I normally do, which is working with spray paint, and like the form as in what happened, I don't know, like the women disappearing, I really wanted to, the idea in the beginning was to have them with their families and then they disappear, so it would be kind of a strong way to show that, and just, I don't know, the technique was basically something I'm really familiar with, and although I never painted portraits before, so it was kind of a long shot, but I think it really turned out nice.
I still feel really unclear about what the form should take in talking about some of the violence thematics. I went out shooting in a car with my mom one day with no plan or no narrative, and we went back into the literal spaces of our history, like quite honestly, the streets, the houses, the spaces, and that's vacancy and that sort of change became very self-evident as we were traveling together, very much in silence most of the time. And so the idea of narrating back upon those spaces fit for that. But I look at this and I wonder how to tell this story differently, or if it should be told in different ways. I think that's something I continue to think through.
I just finished writing a feature-length screenplay. I'm part of this Indigenous Film Fellowship based out of Norway. And Chris Eyre, the director of Smoke Signals, is my mentor for that project. So I just finished writing the feature-length screenplay, and we'll see what happens with it. I don't know if I want to direct it. So the plan is to try and go into pre-production and either sell it or find a director. We'll see.
Great. Jesse?
Yeah, we're going to. We didn't think that the short film was, well, you could talk for a long time about just one of the subjects, one of the cases that we covered, and so we kind of reached out and applied for more funding to get a longer piece going, whether it be a series or it's all up in the air right now. We're just going into research and development right now, so that's where we're at with the film. What's next?
I'm in pre-production with Alexis Mitchell, who's in the back. We've been shooting for over a year, stealthily in various medical establishments with my body. Hopefully no one here was in those rooms. Anyway, we're using the hidden camera footage. That's a project called Stealth, and we are animating the documentary to tell some of those stories that happen behind closed doors.
I'd like to do some stuff around mental health and spirituality, and my sister wrote a play called My Pregnant Brother, and I'd like to write my playwright sister.
Actually, yeah. I have a play that has been picked up by a production company in Vancouver. So they're starting development of that, and that's going to be on stage out there at some point in time. It takes forever to develop a play. Give me 2 years. It's pretty good. It's a Jamaican Canadian lesbian comes out to her family by bringing a lover home for the holiday feast, and the food hits the fan. Look out for that one in a theater near you.
Nice. I'm actually just back from South Africa where I was shooting, so I'm going to make a film, a little one, about that trip. No More Silence. Went actually talked about the missing and murdered women, something I've been working on for over 10 years. So fortunately, used to think that just breaking the silence would make a huge difference. Hasn't. You know, it's great that there's so much more attention to this issue now, but it has not stopped the violence in any way. Has not changed the impunity that perpetrators continue to experience. So we still have to keep doing a lot of work. And yeah, it was good to be in South Africa and sort of disrupt people's images of this country and then talk about apartheid legislation that we still have here, like the Indian Act, for example. So look out for that. Any closing words from the organizers?
I'd like to say a few things. Yeah, I would just love to thank the panel and for the audience for coming out today. Everything I saw was just so powerful and so inspiring, and hearing your feedback and hearing your questions has been really great. And great start to our film festival. So I want to thank. Firstly, I'd like to thank our facilitator, Audrey. Thanks for coming out. Jesse, James, Elle, D-Lishus, Chase. Did I say Jesse? I want to say Jesse one more time, just because I can. For being with us today and for sharing your art and your stories and for being with us here today. So again, we're here as in this film festival starts today, and so it's going to be running all throughout this week towards Thursday. So tomorrow we have another event called Witness Within, and it'll be at Berry Hall. Please grab programs at the back, and once again, thank you so much for being here. So please give a round of applause.